Hey everyone, this is a focus segment from a longer, detailed tutorial where I take a deep dive into several major workflow features. If you'd like to watch the full video with all chapters and additional context, you'll find it linked above and in the description. Okay, let's dive in. The big new feature addition to Final Cut Pro: beat detection. For me, this is definitely the most fun new feature. Gone are the days where if you wanted to edit your project to the beat of a piece of music, you first had to play it back in real time and hit the M key to set reference markers. And that's assuming you even had a decent sense of rhythm for it to be useful. You also had to decide whether to place markers per section, per bar, or even for every single beat. I usually did it for every beat just to keep my options open. But that took time, cluttered the timeline visually, and in the end still wasn't especially precise, often requiring further adjustment afterward. On top of that, there was no way to hide those markers when you didn't need them. And if you used multiple music tracks or multiple instances of the same track, you had to repeat the entire process every single time. The new beat detection feature allows you to intelligently analyze a song and reveal a beat grid so you can visualize and align either individual music tracks or even your edit itself to song parts, bars, and beats. Let's look at this in the context of a 30-second rough cut. I want to do two things here. I want to add music and adjust my current edit to the beat quickly and easily, and I also want to cut the music itself down to exactly 30 seconds. As you'll see, especially the second part is not only easy, but also extremely fast. Let's play through the first few of these songs. As you can hear, they're all pretty much the same tempo, but very different stylistically. I'll connect the second, slightly more energetic song in its entirety to the beginning of my timeline. And as usual, there are several ways to enable beat detection. I can go into the Clip menu, where roughly halfway down I'll find Enable Beat Detection, which uses the default shortcut Option B. And as I always mention in my update videos, if you're using a custom keyboard layout, you won't see any of these new shortcuts unless you assign them yourself or switch back to the default layout. Another option is to select it from the Clip Enhancement menu under the viewer. The last, and probably most convenient option, is to simply right-click the clip in the timeline and select Enable Beat Detection from here. Once I do that, a dialog box appears briefly, indicating that the clip is being analyzed. If you pay close attention to the far right of the center bar, the moment the analysis finishes and beat detection is enabled, a new toggle button appears just to the left of the toggle for the continuously scrolling timeline. It's represented by an icon that looks like a film strip with a music note. If this toggle is visible, that means the active project contains at least one clip with beat detection enabled. And here's a nice little bonus I haven't seen mentioned anywhere else yet. After the analysis, if you open the audio inspector for the music clip, you can also activate or deactivate beat detection from here. But the real gem is that Final Cut actually shows you the detected tempo in beats per minute. You don't need this for beat detection itself, but it's surprisingly useful when you want to compare or match different tracks. Once again, very cool. With beat detection enabled, the music clip now displays a vertical grid that visualizes the parts, bars, and individual beats of the song. Whether I see all three depends on my zoom level. When zoomed in far enough, parts are represented by thick lines highlighting major structural changes in the music, bars, also called measures, by thin lines, and beats by dotted lines. As I zoom out, these lines disappear in stages until only the part indicators remain. Which is great, because otherwise the timeline would become extremely cluttered. In addition, with snapping enabled, Final Cut displays three music style icons when I hover over any of the detected rhythm markers with the skimmer. The plain note with the little sparkles marks parts, the single flag note marks bars, and the double flag note marks beats. Think of these as three zoom levels of rhythm. These icons are of course just symbolic. They don't represent actual musical note values. They simply indicate the three different rhythmic levels detected in the clip. And again, with snapping enabled, dragging an edit point, such as the out point, snaps it directly to the grid lines. Dragging the clip itself left or right also snaps the grid lines to edit points in the timeline. There are two ways to turn the beat detection grid on and off. You can disable it on a per-clip basis by selecting a clip and pressing Option B again. With that, the grid is disabled for this one clip. And if this was the last clip in the project using beat detection, the toggle button disappears as well, which I think is yet another great way of keeping the interface uncluttered. If I want to keep beat detection enabled, but temporarily hide the grid for all clips in the timeline, I can simply re-enable beat detection on a clip so the toggle reappears, and then use that toggle. And if I hover over it with my mouse, the tooltip shows that the shortcut for this is the 0 key. So how can we use this to cut the music down to fit a 30-second edit? To demonstrate how fast this is, I'll first put the music clip into its own secondary storyline by pressing Command G, which also gives it its own little magnetic timeline. If I listen to the first part of the music, we can hear that it's a fairly atmospheric intro that doesn't really fit my much more dynamic content. In fact, if I listen to the second and third parts identified by Final Cut, I'll notice that the track doesn't really take off until the fourth part. So without even listening further, I'll skim directly to the fourth part indicator, which is also confirmed by the small icon that appears when the skimmer snaps to it, and press Command B to make an edit. I can now delete the entire first section. Since the remaining section is still too long, I'll skim to the next part indicator, then to the second to last part indicator, pressing Command B each time, and delete the entire middle section. In just a few seconds, I'm already much closer to my required 30-second length. Now I can zoom in far enough to see the full detail of the grid. All I need to do is drag the out point of the first section, or the in point of the second section, snapping them to the appropriate bar indicators while watching the end of my timeline so the final part indicator lines up with my last edit. I'll shorten the end to meet the 30-second limit and drag out the fade handle so it doesn't cut off abruptly. Done. Let's listen to the edit points. Sounds pretty good to me. And even if I don't like the transition point in the middle, for example, I can very quickly experiment with alternatives by selecting the trim tool and sliding the edit left or right, snapping it to a different bar indicator. I can be confident the transition will still feel musical. This is a really elegant implementation and possibly the best I've seen of this kind of feature. And of course, everything we've just done with the music applies just as much to the video edit itself. With snapping enabled, I can trim, roll, or move video clips so their edit points snap directly to parts, bars, or beats in the grid. That makes it incredibly easy to align visual cuts, transitions, or accent moments precisely to the rhythm of the music without any guesswork or manual markers. Just to show another example of how useful and fast beat detection is, I'll take these 4 music clips and edit them down into a single seamless track. Notice that while the first 3 are all around 110 beats per minute, the fourth one is considerably slower at 83 beats per minute. I'll select all 4 clips and append them to the timeline with the E key, then enable beat detection on all of them using Option B. And now, instead of blading and deleting sections, I'll skim to 2-part indicators in each clip, set an in and out point, and use trim selection from the trim menu, or simply use the shortcut. On a US keyboard, that's Option \, but just use whatever shortcut Final Cut shows you here to keep that section. Doing this once per clip leaves me with exactly 1 musical part from each song, with far fewer clicks and no cleanup. Honestly, I don't see how I could have done this faster without the grid, even if I'd taken several minutes instead of seconds. The only real issue is the obvious speed difference between the last two clips, which makes that transition feel too abrupt. To fix this, I'll toggle the grid back on with the 0 key and zoom in a bit. I'll drag the slower clip underneath the previous one and line up their endpoints, knowing both are on a part marker. I'll select the slower clip and press Command R to open the retiming editor. Dragging the end of the clip to the left speeds it up, and as you can see, the beat detection grid scales perfectly to reflect the new tempo. Once the grids line up as closely as possible, I can close the retiming editor and move the clip back to the end of the timeline. Let's listen again. Much better. And once again, done in just a few seconds. And if you really want to earn some extra credit, you can blade the last clip a few seconds in with Command B, then move down the clip and hit Shift B about halfway through to add a speed blade. Unfortunately, as the warning tells us, variable speed retiming disables beat detection, but we don't need it anymore at this point, so I can click Continue. I'll select the second section of the speed blade, press Shift N to reset it to 100% speed, and drag out the speed transition as far as possible. This is essentially the same technique DJs use, often called tempo riding, where the incoming track is temporarily sped up or slowed down to match what's already playing, and then eased back to its original tempo. Played back. The transition is seamless and the music naturally settles into its final speed. All of this takes well under a minute. Good stuff. So that was one chapter from a much larger tutorial. If you'd like to watch the full breakdown, click here. And here, there's another video YouTube thinks you might enjoy. If this was helpful, feel free to subscribe for more in-depth Final Cut and motion content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.